So if I could grab everyone's attention once again, for those of you who've been following along in your booklet, we have a absolutely phenomenal lunchtime speaker joining us. Admiral retired Inman. If you're not familiar with him, he has an award named after him. That's more or less the introduction you need to know. He also personally represents sort of the civ-mil divide being bridged. He has extensive, you don't retire as a flag officer without extensive military experience. He has spent a career in and of itself in industry and now in academia as well. It is a delightful honor to welcome such a wonderful representative of not just the perspectives that we are truly trying to pull together, but a person who now is continuing to give to the education of professionals like us who are trying to take on these problems and carry it forward in this as a new generation. Sir, thank you for joining us today. We are incredibly lucky to have you.
Thank you. Just enjoy your lunch, and I'll try to be reasonably swift. What I want to do, I'll set an overall stage, but I want to go to Q&A. I much more enjoy responding to questions than just listening to my own voice. Commissioned through Officer Candidate School in the Navy in 26th of March, 1952. Surface warfare officer, shifted to be an intelligence specialist in 61. Had the incredible good fortune of getting picked up for a first star in 74. Moved from that to a 3-star assignment in 76, second 3-star assignment in 77, 4th star in 81, and came to the private sector in 82. So I moved pretty fast through that process. I'm a history major. How did a history major get involved in the technology world and pushing the frontiers? When I became director of naval intelligence in September of 74, I had a second hat, in those days extraordinarily highly classified, black hat, as the director of the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office, buying all the advanced systems to collect intelligence under the surface of the oceans. It was a learning experience, learning how to acquire state-of-the-art high technology systems and deploy them. The good news for me is that all my mistakes are still classified. By the time I got to National Security Agency, I already knew how to go about acquiring, deploying state-of-the-art technology. And then I did my last tour as the Deputy Director of Central Intelligence, and I was much more involved in budgets and programs and occasionally positive foreign intelligence. Escaped after 18 months to the private sector. Now, relevant to your interest, I went from being on that side to the opposite side. I made a conscious decision that I did not want to be involved with defense matters. I didn't want to go back to people who'd worked for me selling things. So I may have bent over too far the other way, but it didn't take long. Secretary Weinberger asked me to serve on the Defense Science Board, did that for a tour. President George H.W. Bush asked me to serve as the vice chair and then the acting chair of the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. So those were my glimpses back into what was happening inside. But I had moved very swiftly to the private sector. Number of large corporate boards running from AT&T to Xerox. Not-for-profit boards, still a trustee of Caltech, 27 years along, So tracking the movement of technology and the movement of industry's application of those technologies. But from a distance, watching and becoming more and more frustrated with what I saw of where I spent the first 31 years of my life. I got involved with venture capital. Between 1984 and this year, I've invested in 57 early stage companies. Few of them were very successful. Large number of them weren't, but never had a bankruptcy because we'd make the judgment that there was not a market or that it wasn't working or there were better competitors in the field and liquidate, return money to shareholders. But that let me keep my fingers on where was technology moving, what was happening. But most of all, to focus on the speed with which what was emerging turned into systems, products, services that could impact in real time. Back in my intelligence days, I had spent a lot of time focused on warning. How could you get information in the hands of decision makers in time to prevent or for direct kinetic impact on targets? And learning that literally minutes can make the difference, time. But as I told you at the outset, I'm a history buff. And I want to retreat for relevance to this crowd to an incredibly talented man named Vannevar Bush. President Roosevelt turned to Dr. Bush to try to bring innovation from campuses to apply to the war effort in World War II. And the general judgment, including by President Roosevelt, was that he had been enormously successful. So we're moving into the final year of the war, and President Roosevelt asked Dr. Bush to study, contemplate, come up with proposals with how the government could continue to try to tap emerging research, particularly in the university arena, in a post-war environment. So he did his study, and then President Roosevelt died. And so he presented his results to President Truman, who had never been exposed to this and knew very little about the effort from universities to support the war effort during World War II. He bought it. And thus came the effort to go find and fund research broadly, using the Office of Naval Research and ultimately, as they grew, counterparts in the Air Force and the Navy. Talented scientists brought in for 2 years to work in the effort would go to a campus, look at research that was cutting edge, that might have some impact on defense needs, and write a voucher to fund it. That was the process, not putting together proposals and going through the enormous bureaucracy. What's more important for our considerations is that in the period that followed, across the 50s, great buildup sparked by NSC 68 and by Korean War to rebuild the military in the process. From research to product in the field, 4 to 5 years. Real-time application while it was still the most relevant technology available. Then Mr. McNamara came to the Pentagon and brought with him systems analysis and the arrogance that you could forecast exactly what was going to happen if you applied systems analysis to the requirements, to the procurement process. And he taught basically honest but not all that bright people how to lie. Because you made your commitment on the cost of this program, and then as you knew more, the cost began to grow. That wasn't permitted. You'd already committed the price. So take out the spare parts, buy them later in the process. And it began, in my view, corrupting an acquisition process. And then the Congress got involved. Don't make a mistake. So add more time and more layers of supervision, oversight, to avoid making a mistake. And then more layers kept getting added. By the time I retired,